Don't go anywhere, Vikings fans. In just 1 minute, I'm going to explain to you why I still believe in general manager Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. We've been seeing the talks on Twitter. I've been seeing a lot of Vikings fans are upset with how the Vikings have kind of handled this 2023 NFL offseason. I completely disagree. I think with what Kwesi had coming into the offseason, he has made the absolute most of it. The Vikings coming into the offseason were second to last in draft capital. They were dead last in cap space heading into free agency, and he was still able to bring in guys such as Marcus Davenport, Byron Murphy, still got a really quality piece in Jordan Addison. And hey, you were able to move off some of the older guys on the roster such as Eric Kendricks, Patrick Peterson, and you saved money by trading away Jadeveon Smith and cutting running back Dalvin Cook. I just think everybody needs to pump the brakes real quick and just trust the process. And honestly, I've been saying it all offseason. You just got to let Kwesi cook, but let's talk about it. What's going on, guys? Welcome in the Vikings Now. I'll be your host for today's show. And on today's show, we're going to be looking at 5 free agent targets that the Vikings could sign with the extra cap space that they got from cutting Dalvin Cook. But let's start with this. How much cap space do the Vikings actually have? So after the Jadeveon Smith trade to the Cleveland Browns and after cutting former Florida State running back Dalvin Cook, the Vikings sit at $18.75 million in cap space, which is a lot more than they had before. You know, the Vikings have been kind of in cap space hell this entire offseason, but obviously with those 2 moves, it's really opened it up. So on today's show, we're going to be diving into 5 names I think the Vikings could sign and be immediate, impactful starters. Starting off with the most important position of need for the Minnesota Vikings, that being cornerback, and the best free agent cornerback left on the market, Marcus Peters. Marcus Peters formerly played with the Baltimore Ravens this past season, and he has still got a lot, or maybe not a lot left in the tank, but he still has 1 year left in the tank, and I think he could be a huge contributor to this Vikings defense next season. His stats from 2022 and 13 games played, 47 tackles, 2 forced fumbles. He did end up getting an interception and 6 pass breakups. But if you're looking at this Vikings cornerback room as where it stands right now, Byron Murphy, I think he's a solid player, but is he a true cornerback 1 in the NFL? Probably not. I would probably slate him more as a, cornerback 2 on a, championship level defense. And then Andrew Booth Jr. and Caleb Evans. Both know their stories. They dealt with injuries last season. We really need them to kind of step up and take that next step to help this Vikings secondary out. But I do think if you put in Marcus Peters in this group, I think he's going to fit Brian Flores' system extremely well. We know what Brian Flores likes to do. He likes to be aggressive, and he likes to have his corner sit in that press man-to-man defense with most of the time you don't have any safety help over the top because Brian Flores, he likes to be aggressive, bring blitzes, which normally means there will be no safety help for the corner, and that's what Marcus Peters excels in. That's where he's like sitting down in that chair, going mano-a-mano against another team's wide receiver. He loves to do it. He's a great press man corner. He's been that way his entire career, and I honestly think he would have one more year left in the tank of high-quality play at that position. And overall, that's why he is my top choice. Like, before I show you guys the rest of this list, I will say this. If I had to pick any free agent that the Vikings could bring in, Marcus Peters, no doubt, will be the guy that I would want them to sign. I just think in terms of position of need, in terms of fit with the Brian Flores defensive scheme, I just think it makes way too much sense. And now, obviously, the Vikings have some money to pay him. So I think Marcus Peters, my number 1 choice no matter what. Well, I ask you guys, who do you guys want the Vikings to sign? This is going to be the pinned comment on today's video. So YouTube, it's going to throw you an ad break your way. Sit back, let it play, and let me know what free agent you want the Vikings to sign. When the ad break plays, sit back and go answer today's pinned comment. Number 2 on this list, Yannick Ngakoue, former Minnesota Viking. If you guys remember that 1 year he had with the Vikes, it was a short tenure. I think he played about 6-7 games, but he was actually pretty effective for the Vikings that year. But obviously with the Danielle Hunter trade rumors kind of being thrown around here, edge could potentially be a need for the Vikes. Ngakoue's past four seasons, I mean, he is a sack machine. Like, he can rack up sacks better than everybody. I mean, almost 40 sacks over the last 4 years. Quarterback hits, he's always ranked high in that statistical category. TFL numbers looking good as well, and he is just a strictly pass rush specialist. But I will say this. I don't think he actually fits well with what the Vikings want to get done on that side of the football. I've been saying it all offseason. Versatility, versatility, versatility. That's what works with Brian Flores. You got to have guys who can play multiple positions and do just multiple roles very, very well. Yannick Ngakoue, he's more of just a pin your ears back and a pass rush specialist. So, yes, it would be more of a want than a need for the Vikings. Like, I wouldn't be upset if we would obviously bring in, a good pass rusher in the NFL, but I just don't really think Brian Flores could get the most out of him, or if he could kind of take that next step under the Brian Flores defense, because honestly, he's just not too versatile. Good pass rusher and all, but I just don't think he would fit too well with the Minnesota Vikings. Number 3 on this list, we're going to flip to the offensive side of the field here for a second. Dalton Risner. Dalton Risner is probably the best interior offensive lineman left on the market, and I think he would, fit a position of need for the Minnesota Vikings. Like, interior offensive line play the past couple of years, like, I like Garrett Bradbury, I like Ezra Cleveland, I like Ingram, but I don't love any of them. Like, none of them really blow me away with their play at all. It's been incredibly inconsistent. It's kind of been that roller coaster effect, and we've really seen that at the guard spot. Like, Ezra Cleveland and Ed Ingram, like, it was every other game last year. It was like, oh, they played great. Oh, they played bad. It was just up and down too much. And Dalton Risner could add some sense of consistency at the interior offensive line spot. But PFF grades from last season, he was okay. I mean, by no means was he great, but by no means was he was bad. I mean, 42 out of 77 ranked interior offensive lineman, a 61.1 overall grade. Only had 1 penalty, keeps it pretty clean, plays clean football, and then he did only allow 3 sacks on the year. Obviously, we know how important the interior of the offensive line is for a statuesque quarterback like Kirk Cousins, because obviously he lacks mobility, and that interior pressure affects him more than other guys. Dalton Risner, I'd be in on it. I think he would be an immediate day one starter for the Vikes and just be a better option than Ezra Cleveland or Ed Ingram. But I ask you, would you sign Dalton Risner with the Vikings' remaining cap space? Give me an S for sign or give me a P for pass down in the comments section. I'm all in on it. Anytime you could add more interior offensive line help in Minnesota, I would be all in. Number 4 on my list is Melvin Ingram, another edge rusher we're talking about here. Because obviously, listen, Danielle Hunter, that's going to be a separate thing. But I will say, if the Vikings were to move off Danielle Hunter, edge rusher by far, I think, becomes the number 1 position of need for this team. Last season, Melvin Ingram, solid year. I mean, 6 sacks, 7 TFLs, 10 quarterback hits. He did have a forced fumble, and then 22 tackles in 17 games played. But I do think this all comes down to Hunter. Like, bringing in a guy like Melvin Ingram, I don't think it would be necessarily like the biggest need for the Vikings. Again, it's more of a want. But then again, that will flip completely on its head if we were to trade Danielle Hunter. Like, then I think edge rusher would become a huge need, where it was like the Vikings defense, it was already terrible last year. But if you take Danielle Hunter off that team and heading into next season, like, this defense by far, talent-wise, would be the worst in the NFL. So obviously a lot of this talk around the edge rusher position does come down to what the Vikings are going to do with Danielle Hunter. I've seen trade packages thrown out there where the Vikings get a second, a third, and everything. I don't want to move off Hunter unless it's for a first-round pick, or maybe it's a third-round pick and maybe Chase Young or something. Maybe you could work something out with Commanders with, the talks over there that they could be wanting to move on from Chase Young. But again, adding an edge rusher for the Vikings, it all depends on Danielle. But speaking of another edge rusher, Jadeveon Clowney. He's another target out there that I think the Vikings could be interested in. Obviously, Kwesi has that connection with the Cleveland Browns where he came from. And Jadeveon Clowney obviously spent time in Cleveland when Kwesi was there. But the thing is with Clowney, he is just a run specialist. Like, yes, those 9 sacks in 2021, but what he does well is stopping the run. And I honestly think Clowney's fit with Brian Flores I think he would honestly fit in fairly well. Like, I mean, he can do multiple things well at that edge spot, but overall the production, I just feel like we play the same game with Clowney every year. Like, he never plays, the full 16, 17 games. He's always in and out with injuries, and it always kind of seems like he has a bad attitude. And if you guys don't know, Clowney's time in Cleveland ended fairly poorly. Like, there was the report that came out that, they just told him not to show up for the last game of the regular season because he was upset that Myles Garrett was getting favorable matchups. Like, they were upset then he thought they were stat padding for Myles Garrett. hey, Jadeveon, here's the thing. No matter what team you go to, they're going to try to get their best edge rusher favorable matchups. It kind of was a selfish kind of take from Clowney. So I'll be kind of out on him. But anyways, those are 5 names that I think the Minnesota Vikings could possibly sign. If you guys want to stay up to date on all Vikings news and rumors, just give me a follow on Twitter at Pat Siepman. And if you follow me from today's video and shoot me a DM, just send me free agents. I'll give you a follow back. But as always, thank you guys for watching. Skol Vikes.